Thank you so much for having me here today. I've been to this meeting a couple of times and I've always felt so welcomed and loved and accepted. So thank you for having me. And do you know this service could not have come at a better time for me because I have been on my knees. I have been on my knees for the last 2 weeks. I probably experienced the most intense pain and suffering since I joined CoDA 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. And it's amazing how these things work out, like how my higher power has given me the opportunity to give service in this kind of meeting that feels like, really homely to me. Um, and shown me how infallible I am as a human being. Like, if, one of my defects is I want to be the poster girl for CoDA. I want to be the poster girl for everything. Like, I want to be that shiny, um, I've got it all wrapped up in a bow, and that's like my perfectionism. And I have been given a huge dose of humility this week, which actually the irony is that that's what makes me connect. And that's my deepest need to be, to love and be loved and find connection. And it's humility that actually brings me there. So um when I was asked to do this share and ask and well actually no this workshop. So in terms of this workshop, let me just share with you the way I plan to run it. It's going to be like I was joking before, fly by the seat of my pants, or it could be fly by the seat of my higher power, with ultimate faith that because I live the program in the sense that it is the core central, it's the thing that guides my entire life. That actually I've got this in the sense I am just going to kind of go through, in a way, a traditional share, which is my childhood, um, kind of how I came to CoDA, and now, but based around compliance, and that's the pattern that I chose to speak about, and it was really easy to choose that because compliance has been my biggest go-to, I think, from since I was a child, and yeah, I'll in fact, what I'll do is I'm gonna get a little bit current to show you how human I am and how despite, praying every day, I say the step one code of prayer every day. I, my higher power is always in my mind. I do all the stuff. And yet, okay, this week, something that happened, which was kind of the pinnacle of my, yeah, on my kneesness was I was in the car with my two daughters and they were having a FaceTime with their father, my ex-husband. My daughter, who's 10 years old, had makeup on. It's, I hold it very lightly. It's a form of self-expression. I'm really, yeah, I hold it lightly. And it was, her dad could see it. And he said, why are you wearing makeup? Take it off right now. It looks really cheap. You don't have a responsible adult there to tell you this, obviously, but you need an adult there to tell you this. And I could see my daughter's face. It was like her self-esteem just got punched in the stomach, and her face, it was, I could see and I could feel the shame. When I was, I'm trying to remember what age now. It was 17 years old. I wore a sleeveless dress to go to, you'd call it a prom in America. We call it a ball over in England, but a prom. And my dad said I looked cheap. And there was another time where I was on the phone to a guy, and it was past 9 o'clock in the evening. And again, my dad caught wind of this and called me a tart. And those two particular adjectives, for me, they were the most shaming things. I mean, those are things that really, really stuck with me. So I had my own reactions to when this happened in the car. And I did two things. Now, one of the things I did was go to my daughter and just love her and hold space for her. And then I kind of put her hand on her heart and I said, you are so lovable, loving, and loved. I said, this is not about you. This is about your dad, and you don't have anything, like I basically, I kind of acted with what I've learned in recovery. Okay. So I have so much to thank recovery for, to be able to hold space for my daughter. And we had a great day in the end. But I'll tell you what else I did. So she did have blusher on, but wherever she put it on, the lighting wasn't good, whatever. It doesn't really matter actually about circumstances. But I could see it was quite red. And what I did was I grabbed a wipe and I said, oh, it is actually really red. Let me take it off. And so I complied in that moment. I complied, and the next day I started making my style is more passive aggressive. I'm very confrontational avoidant. I'm very compliant. So the next evening as well, I made some comments about, and it was compliance and control. To me, they're kind of like two sides of the same coin, because actually compliance is all about control. I'm trying to control the situation. I'm kind of trying to control the outcome by complying. I'm trying to manage the rage around me. It's all about control when it comes to compliance. But the next evening, I said something like, girls, if you're going to wear makeup, it needs to be removed at the end of the evening. Otherwise, we're going to have to reconsider wearing the makeup. And my daughter, this is where I feel really, really glad for the program as well. My daughter calls me out on it all the time on my defects. She'll be like, Mummy, that was shame and blame, or so this time she goes, Mummy, I think you're taking what Dad said, and that's where that's coming from. She's 10 years old. And you know what? I said, I think you're right. And that's when I shut up. But okay, the whole point of that is I went to compliance. I went to complying so that I can be a good girl. And that's what my dad always used to tell me. And he goes, if I'm leaving to go out, be good. You're going to work hard, be good. And I would take good to be synonymous with compliance. So it's almost like he was saying, comply. I'd be like, yeah, okay. And for me, being good inside was all about complying, because I didn't believe I was good enough already. I didn't believe what I am growing into believing in CoDA. It'd be a lie to say I believe it unequivocally, because otherwise I wouldn't ever veer away from God's path. But I'm growing into believing that I was made good. I was born good. I'm like the most beautiful, precious creation of God. And I don't need to be anything more or less than I am. I've already got the goodness inside, and I don't have to do anything but breathe to just believe that I'm good. But that's where that compliance comes from. It's like to be good, because I'm not good enough. So yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that I work really hard at my program. I have a really strong relationship with my higher power, and I still comply. And I think what I've realized with fellowship, the longer I spend in it, the more I realize that it will never make me immune to the feelings. And I don't know if it'll ever make me immune to the compulsion of acting in my defects. It's the space in between that is that magical golden window of opportunity to change the action. So it's like I will be compelled to comply, but it's the the action that can change. So yeah, that's just a kind of almost touch upon my childhood, bringing us into the present where I am still a very fallible human being. So okay, I'll go back to my childhood a little bit. So I did grow up in my sponsor, when I was going through my step 4, described it as an excruciating controlling environment. And so as a child, there are numerous instances of when I would comply. It would be from very light ways, where it's almost like I used compliance both for the carrot and because of the stick. So the compliance was used where, for example, my parents would go out, and as soon as they left the house, I would go into frantic cleaning mode. And this is like as a young girl, not even a teenager. And so they'd come home and the house would be clean and the ironing would be done, and I would be like that kind of puppy dog, looking for that accolade, that praise, because haven't I been a good girl? So that's one of the ways the compliance would come out. And the second would be in reaction to fear. And that's where it really is a very strong compulsion for me. When I feel unsafe, compliance is my go-to. So this happened throughout my childhood, but it also went into adulthood. I grew up in an Indian family, and from a very early age, it was made incredibly clear that what was expected of me was to get married to somebody with my own community of my parents' choosing. And I went to university, not having had any relationships, and I fell in love with my best friend. And it's probably only the only example of a healthy relationship I have, sadly, in terms of intimate relationship. And we were together for a number of years. I kept it completely secret from my parents. But when it came to crunch time, I simply did not have the courage or the self-esteem to tell my parents because he wasn't Indian. He was of Asian origin, like, Oriental origin. And though I loved him deeply, we decided to break up on graduation day because I couldn't bear, because I was so enmeshed with my family, I could not bear, I wouldn't have been able to survive not having their love in the form that it came. So I complied. I complied as a young adult without even them having to say anything directly. I never told them. I just broke up with him. And I went through all that pain kind of alone and really, really suffered. And to this day, it's kind of one of those things where I it's I still grapple with, in the sense that, when people say, do you have any regrets? On some days I can stand and say, I wouldn't change anything that's happened because it's brought me here. That whole beautiful spiritual, outcome, which I really do resonate deeply with sometimes. And I feel so grateful for coming to CoDA and everything that brought me here. And then other times I do wonder and think, yeah, like, if I had just found God sooner, if I had if I'd found CoDA sooner, who knows what would have happened, and if I didn't take that compliant decision. So yeah, that was kind of my childhood. And then where they say codependency is a progressive disease. So I found that to be absolutely and entirely the case. And my marriage, the breakdown of which brought me to CoDA, really, really was, yeah, the biggest example of what turned out to be this dance between compliance and control. Like I've said, I think for me, compliance is certainly a means of control. And actually mirroring what I experienced in my childhood, where this really came out is with a particular group of individuals. And it was, in particular, what made me feel unsafe were men like my dad. So where the compliance really came up was with alpha males. And there's a whole load of CoDA shares by the therapist who was the couples counselor of Mary and the founders of CoDA. And I had a brain fart moment. Mary Ann, maybe I've forgotten it. Ken, that's what I was gonna say. Maybe I'm purposely not remembering the name of the man. Isn't that interesting? There's a whole lot of shares by, in fact, that is one link I'm gonna just post. It's to one of her audio things. She was the couples, yeah, therapist. And she said something that really kind of hit home, where she said, as a codependent, you wake up and how you relate, how you go through your day, how you see everything is that, am I less than or more than? Am I less than or more than? And that's how you relate to everyone and everything. That's how I was raised. And in my marriage to an alpha man, there was only one way that I knew to go, which was less than. And so I quite naturally took the compliant role, and he quite naturally took the control role, at least in the most overtly conventional ways of expressing those roles. And it was a really kind of, that power dynamic played right through the entire marriage until until I left. It was very strongly in place. And when I left, and I left down to what would be deemed as kind of coercive control. What I found really surprising is that when I came into CoDA, I identified with all the control patterns. And that was really, really uncomfortable for me, because the way that I used compliance was, because I didn't believe I was good, I had to make you bad so that I could be good. And that's the way I really used on compliance. Because if I comply, I'm the good one. If I comply, I'm the victim. If I comply, I need your sympathy and your empathy, and I'm the weaker one that needs protection, and therefore I'm the angel and you're the devil. But I've helped without the kind of the sort of awareness that I've helped set that whole thing up to meet my need because I'm not enough. So yeah, that's how I really used on compliance. And actually, okay, so this is, you know, you're very obvious, all familiar probably with this PDF, this document about all the patterns. Mine is very dog-eared because I use it as part of my step 10. So I kind of go through which patterns I've displayed. And what I thought I would do is I'd go through the patterns and then the recovery characteristics and give examples in terms of my ESH around that, my experience, strength, and hope around each of those patterns. So the first one are extremely loyal, remaining in harmful situations too long. And that shows up in all areas of my life. I was in my marriage for 7 years in total, 5 of which were I accepted the unacceptable. I think that's what it was. And part of the reason I complied was before even compliance comes along, it's recognizing what is unacceptable. I didn't really have I didn't make space for my feelings. I didn't make space for my feelings because I was so interested and so attached to the outcome of, let's say, the perfect family, because that's what gave me value. I was so unaware of my feelings, and I would medicate with fantasy, delusion, denial, and just the spiritual solution, that I wouldn't even be aware of what was unacceptable, and I didn't even know what my own boundaries were. I had no idea really about who I was, what my values were, what I deserved, because I had an incredibly low self-esteem. And so I always remained in situations too long because I didn't even know who I was and what I wanted. And so in recovery, it says, I'm committed to my safety and leave situations that feel unsafe or inconsistent with my goals. And those are two separate things, actually, where I feel unsafe. And so I think this is what I had to get really familiar with. What are the signs of that which I can get familiar with that show when I'm unsafe? So I couldn't recognize these signs. I couldn't actually tell when I was unsafe. Whereas I think for me, the first thing has been a kind of a lot of body awareness. Like when I feel unsafe, and this is really obvious in a way, but it's like my heart rate goes. I don't feel like eating anymore. So suddenly that's kind of switched off. I start sweating. This is in extreme when it goes to kind of and I have felt actually terrorized this week. I've actually felt terrorized. So that's the real extreme of terror. Um, and then the quieter things of like when I feel unsafe, because fear is like the most extreme version of feeling unsafe, but the baby version of fear is anxiety, and it's about recognizing those whispers of anxiety. So when I'm anxious, I tend to overthink. I obsessively think. I overanalyze and I over research. So I look to like answers on the internet to the point where I'll be like even Googling, what do you do if you don't like the way you're, I'll get a bit obsessive over it. It will affect my sleep. I'll be compulsively driven to do. So it might be extra tidying up. It may be not taking breaks when I work. It's about recognizing those things in my body as to where I feel unsafe, and then the wisdom that there's another way versus falling into compliance, that I have a choice. And I think that's what it is. And I've learned in CoDA that I have a choice. And the other thing is I have the right to change my mind. And that's something I wouldn't allow myself the freedom to do. So for example, actually, this is a really relevant example because it also comes into, okay, the pattern of give up their truth to gain the approval of others or to avoid change. So I'm going to share with you something that's come up very recently that's caused me, that's really triggered me, that's really pushed me into looking at this pattern of compliance. So my daughter, we live in an area where you can get into a fantastic school by doing this particular set of exams. The last 2 years, my ex-husband and I have been on the same page. Let's get our daughter to do these classes, train for the exam, sit the exam, she gets into a great school. Isn't that all lovely? My daughter started these classes with literally bounding with joy. She would come out and she would love the classes. It was such an easy kind of thing to just be on board with. Um, but then what happened is that as time has gone on, as more tuition's been added in by her dad, as more homework's come along, she's really been emotionally struggling. And it took me a really long time to really listen to her and take action to advocate for her. So she's basically been asking not to do this exam for a number of different reasons for so long. And I've been holding space, and it's been a journey, but essentially I came to the conclusion that this is not right for her, and I need to stop enabling and pull her out of this tuition. I cannot tell you how difficult it has been for me, as in emotionally, to go to my ex-husband and say, hey, I was on completely the same page as you, but now I'm not. I'm going to pull my daughter out from the tuition because this is like how important it is to him. I can't really articulate. It's very, very important, and I have been used to a very rageful reaction around this topic. It's And so the thought of going in there and advocating for my daughter, pulling her out, literally terrified me. Terrified me. I would, if it wasn't for her, I really would want to just comply. I'd like to abandon my values, self-abandon, give up my truth to avoid change. But the difficulty is, having done the steps, having looked at step 4, seeing how I worked so hard not to get my needs met by using this blanket of thorns that used to be so, really served me as a child. It doesn't work anymore. It really is a blanket of thorns. I now can't do that. So what I tend to do is get myself, I just, I get, I get myself into a state, and then I get to on my knees, and then I pray to God for the how, because I'm willing. And that's the beauty of the program, that all I need to do is be willing and God will show me a way. So I often get on my knees and think, I have no idea how I'm going to find the courage to do this. I have no idea of how I'm going to do it, what I'm going to say, how I'm going to communicate, and it just is completely miraculous how it just comes. It either comes through God in skin, which is like other people, so outreach, or it just comes through quiet, like whisper within that becomes like a knowing, and then it flows. It just, it's a miracle. It's nothing short of a miracle how I do then manage to find the courage and the willingness and the words to follow through. And it happens each and every time. It's just incredible. So now, with that example, I stand in my truth and maintain my integrity, whether others approve or not, even if it means making difficult changes in my life. And that kind of really resonates with On the Promises, in terms of when I think about the woman I want to grow into, it's with integrity, courage, integrity, and dignity. So that's kind of, that's a real pathway to that. The other one, okay, compromise. Okay, so that's the one I covered actually. Compromise as well, their own values and integrity to avoid rejection, anger. Whereas what builds self-esteem is I am rooted in my own values, even if others don't agree or become angry. And I added to that one upset, because actually I had an experience where I realized that it wasn't just angry. So that's definitely, I'm definitely like, anger brings out the compliance within me for sure. But also when somebody's really, really upset by what I don't or do, what I do or don't do, that also brings out the compliance in me too. So it's kind of a different flavor of how I'm influenced to bring out my compliance. Put aside their own interests in order to do what others want. And for me, a great remedy to that is What do I need? What do I feel? What do I want? And that needs to be my primary question when considering any action. And can be down as simple as, there's a party next week. Do I actually want to go? Yes would be kind of just neurologically my answer to everything, because I suffered from massive FOMO. I don't know if you have that acronym in the US, fear of missing out. So pre-COVID, I had a massive FOMO. I would completely overschedule because I couldn't bear to miss anything. Whereas actually that helped to address it. And now I do ask, okay, what do I want? What do I need? And what do I feel? And I bring it back to one of my main values, which is serenity is sacrosanct to my being. Now, if that's my main value, one of the biggest things is rest. So I often ask myself, okay, serenity is sacrosanct to my being. Is that providing me with what I need? And then I can basically put into practice. I consider my interests and feelings when asked to participate in others' plans. Do you know, another way in which I use the compliance patterns is by looking at the recovery patterns to the compliance and using them as affirmations. So I find that if something's coming up my step 10 a lot, like one of the particular patterns, whether it be low self-esteem, compliance, whatever it is, then I use for a period of time the recovery patterns affirmation that I say in the mirror, putting my hand on my heart. And that, again, neurologically helps reprogram my compulsion to comply. Are hypervigilant regarding the feelings of others and take on those feelings. Yeah, totally. Still do that. Won't ever be cured. I'm better. I find that, you know what happens? I will take on the emotions, but all of these stuff, when I fall into compliance patterns, because of fellowship, they don't last as long. I think that's what it is. I'm not stuck in the compliance hole for a really long time, or at least as long as it used to be, because of all the tools, everything: journaling, praying, two-way prayer, meditation, outreach, meeting, all the stuff that you're all probably very familiar with. But I don't spend as long in the patterns because I'm also much more aware. So I can and sometimes it's a matter of just really sitting and recognizing that I'm in hypervigilance. And I think it's probably really important to share with you a little bit, what time is it, of my journey with compliance, in the sense that when I was a child, compliance was my friend. It was something that kept me safe. And instead of being a blanket of thorns, it was truly a warm, protective blanket. And then it was only as an adult, when I had autonomy, when I had freedom but never believed it, that it became a blanket of thorns. But my journey with that beautiful inner child who protected me for so long was quite fraught. And when I first realized that I was still complying as an adult, and I hadn't yet grown into a more loving, compassionate soul for myself and others, I was really mean to that inner child that protected me. And I would describe that behavior, the compliance, not with equanimity at all. I would chastise myself and to call myself a doormat. I had no, oh, that's hard. That's really painful. I had no grit. Those aren't my words, actually. They're my ex-husband's words. You have no grit. But I would replay them, and they come from somewhere deeper within. Otherwise, they have no power. So I would really be mean to that child who protected me. And then and I wouldn't say it's consistently, but because of the affirmations for kind of in recovery, because of the different actions, because of the growth of self-esteem and compassion, I'm definitely more loving and gentle with myself when it comes to the compliance coming up. And now I have a different relationship with that child. And I understand that when she feels unsafe, that's what she turns to. And she needs to also be heard. She really needs to be heard. And as long as I give her a seat on the table, and I can consider her feelings and her views and the way she'd like to handle it, she can be of real value. And I guess that's the whole integration of the whole, internal family systems and things like that. But it's really loving and respecting that child. And I guess so coming towards kind of the break time, I was thinking that after break, it's going to be, shares and questions by all means, but a few questions that I literally came up with just now that might be helpful would be so when was your compliant child born? So are there any particular incidents or events that you can remember where you really you needed to be compliant, to be safe? That was one of the questions. The second was, in your adult life, when does your compliant child come up? And how does she or he express themselves? So I guess another way of putting that is, how do you recognize that you're unsafe? In what circumstances do they come up, and how do they express themselves to you? What whispers and screams do you get from your compliant child? The next one was, how do you feel about them? So what relationship do you have with your compliant child? And I should probably write these down in the chat. If anyone's writing these down, can do that for me, that would be amazing. Otherwise, I'll write these down in the chat. And what do they need to feel safe? So what do they need to hear? And what do you need to do to help them feel safe so that they don't have to scream, so that you don't have to use compliance versus other more healthy, beneficial tools that will serve you better? Yeah. Okay. I think I'm probably going to wrap up now. Was there anything else I was going to say? No, I think I might wrap. Okay, is everyone back? Yeah. So, and is someone happy to time the sharing? It's 3 minutes, right? Brilliant. So I guess we can do, how many people? It's quite big, 30. So if you do a hands raised, or that'll probably be the easiest way, and then come in to ask your question or to share, or answer the question, one of them, all of them, however much time allows. Yeah, I'll share a little something about kind of to wrap up a bit of what I was saying, if that's okay. Through what's happened recently, which has been a whole load of events that I've been triggered, left, right, and center. Something really lovely happened where my daughter did something different. Something like I don't know if it was this, but for example, she wants to be a professional footballer. That's her dream at the moment. That is so not what like an Asian girl does, like an Indian girl. So it's like a proper, it's probably different. And I've used the word in the past of being a cycle breaker. Because, for example, like no one in my family ever divorced. I was the first one, and that's part of the cycle breaking, as is not falling into the passive compliance, which I think specifically for me, I'm not saying for everyone, for me as a woman, what I did was very, very, very cycle breaking. And my daughter said to me recently, I think it's in association with the football thing, she goes, "Mummy, I'm a cycle breaker just like you." And that's where the joy is of like going forward, that I have compliance still deeply running through my veins, but the pause allows me to maybe act and therefore model something different, whilst being very honest with my feelings of I'm still in fear and it still takes courage, but it doesn't mean I have to kind of give in to that kind of that calling to comply. And she turned around to me when we were having this really lovely conversation. Two things actually that really lit up my world. And when she named, I said, "What are the things that really bring you joy?" And one of the things she said, out of like the three, was like spending time with you, Mummy. And she goes, it was out of nowhere. She goes, "Mom, you're a really good mum." And it was so beautiful to receive. And I can, because of CoDA, I can integrate that and actually accept it. I can, there's that affirmation, I can hold it in my heart more than a fleeting moment and let it nurture me and believe it. I am a good mum. And that's why the bombardments of kind of whatever I might receive from the outside world, they don't have as much hold. And the other thing to do with compliance that's changed through CoDA is I think it's partly to do with that anyway. Me distancing myself from that call of compliance is I came to this program and my higher power took on the form eventually of like this really loving, gentle, kind, compassionate, I suppose, Holy Father, you know, like a really loving and gentle Father. Whereas I now have two higher powers, and she's actually the one that kind of mostly governs my business as well. I'm in a number of fellowships, but and she is a kick-ass woman. She has like fire and she can assert herself and she has immense dignity and grace and courage and integrity, but she has a fire in her belly. And I talk about this, with my girls. I'm like, so right now I'm kind of feeling like a bit icky and small, but I'm telling you, inside me, there's this kick-ass mom who wants to just like, and so she's coming alive. And I think sometimes as much as I can feel like, oh, this is so hard, it's like for me, I've been a sleeping bear. And sometimes it takes, the narcissist, or if we're going to throw labels, but an external source of real like poking the bear for the bear to really wake up. And it takes a certain threshold for compliance not to be the tool of desire, for this bear to really wake up into, for me, her becoming. Yeah. So is there anyone else that wants to share, ask questions? Please go ahead. I've been saying sick man prayer a lot this week. As in, bless you, transform me, which is what I heard. Bless you, transform me. Yeah. Do you know another really nice exercise actually to do with once you get compliant, once you get acquainted, sorry, with your compliant child, is to thank the compliant child for what she or he or they have given. So, I mean, the very definition of compliant, if you think of it like a metal, it's something that's bendy and something, and to be flexible of mind is actually also can be a really beautiful thing. So with the compliant child, yeah, in an extreme, it can be self-abandoning, but actually there are huge assets, like every part of me, there are huge assets to every child that's on board. And to love that child is part of recognizing what they have given me, how they have been such a blessing, not just in my childhood, but yeah, I'm just like, even in my job, it's part of my job that I have to take an open-minded, unbiased, flexible approach with offering a range of options. I literally had that in an email recently. If I didn't have any compliance at all, one of the healthy aspects of compliance is flexibility and open-mindedness. And that allows us to accept other human beings as they are, which is a real essence of the program. So if I can, accept me, I can accept others. So there is a beautiful part, that aspect as well, that adaptation. Yeah. I thank you so much for that. One of the best analogies I've heard, actually, that reminded me of when you were speaking of resilience, is they said it's like a child can be very resilient, and it's like a bended coat hanger, that you can bend it back because it's pliable, because it's compliant, because it's flexible, but it does leave a kink, so it doesn't bend back like a spring. But yeah, that's so true. It is part of resilience. Thank you. If I heard a question there, please stop me if this is not what you meant, you didn't want anything. But if there's a question, it's like almost, where does the threshold lie, and how would you go about not complying, but not also in some way self-sabotaging or acting inappropriately? I guess what I can say is from my experience. So I received, as part of what's been happening in my life recently, an email that I found both inappropriate and abusive. And this was the second bit of communication that I'd received from this individual that I found was unacceptable. And something that's really stuck, and this is like just gifts from outreach, is that, you don't need to accept the unacceptable. And in terms of threshold, I think it's very personal. So for me, this was unacceptable. Others, it may not be unacceptable. I think it's working out my own threshold as And I do that with my feelings. If I've got feelings, I listen to them. Usually anger is there to tell me, right, a boundary's been crossed. So if a boundary's been crossed and I've got boundary invasion, or then I don't need to accept the unacceptable. So what I did was I wrote back, and this was with support. So I did some outreach around this. I wrote it. I actually said, what's your feedback on this? So I got some kind of what I call God and skin, like outreach feedback. And I wrote an email back to this individual saying that this is clearly important to you. However, its delivery I find inappropriate and unacceptable. Please do not send a communication of this nature. When you're ready to communicate in a respectful and civil manner, I'm willing to listen. There's some dishonesty in there, and I regret this last bit, but I'm not perfect, because actually with this particular individual, where I am spiritually right now, I'm not actually willing to listen. Like, you may hear some anger here. You may need to step 4 around this. I get it, 4 and 5, and you name it. But I'm not willing to listen to this individual. And really, if it was all honesty, I'd probably reply back, I'm not your mother. Get an effing therapist. But that might be inappropriate on my terms, I think. But I did lay down a boundary. And that boundary was invaded. So I received another lot of communication that I found inappropriate. And I mean, what more can I really do? So I ignore it because that's what I said. So it's about upholding a boundary and having a realistic consequence, that boundary that I can uphold. If I put a consequence in that I'm not willing to follow through with, then it doesn't help me. But so that, I mean, that's one of the boundaries, examples of how I can not comply, because then I'm not accepting the unacceptable, but also I'm acting within my power. I'm powerless over them. I can't stop them sending further emails, but I can announce that I'm not willing to read it or listen and follow through with that. So it went straight into, I have a God box, like, so inbox, outbox, junk mail. And I have a God box where I put things that I just surrender to God. And I have to put an internal boundary in not reading it again and again and again and obsessing over it, because I also compelled to do that often as well. I mean, I hope that adds something to it. Do I think it's brought something specific that I think I'm going to share, that it's almost like, I think it's my favorite sentence of my sponsor when I was sharing my step 4. Is it any wonder that, you did this, you did it? Is it any wonder? And I think something really big in society, it was like an endemic, as endemic in our society, that, the whole things where children should be seen and not heard. As a child, it's almost like biological to comply. And I don't normally mention my career, but because you mentioned dentists, so I graduated as dentist in 2002, and we had this pediatric textbook that was, I guess at the time, slightly outdated because it wasn't like a brand new, published copy. But we had this pediatric textbook that said one of the techniques you could use to manage child's patience was called the hand over mouth technique. And I remember at the time experiencing literally shock and horror that we were reading about this in 2002, where one of the techniques a dentist could use was putting their hand over a child's mouth and whispering in their ear something like, basically a threat. It was like, if you're good, then this will all be okay. I mean, it sounds like something out of a horror movie. But I guess it made me remember that, is it any wonder that as children we complied with adults? It was almost, I think it was just, it was a given. It was the way that parenting, I was taught how to do it as a professional. Commenting on one of the questions, because someone said, I like the last question. I often find if I can't get into a place of compassion or a spiritual kind of answer, or one of the best things to get me to that place is, how would God speak to me? How would God speak to my compliant child? And how would God feel about my compliant child? And that will bring me to the most compassionate version. And that's what I find two-way prayer does. I don't know if like, to get to some of these answers, the most loving spiritual outcome can be for me, two-way prayer. And I found there are 2 different ways of which I can do it. And it could be asking the question, eyes closed, just in whatever way you want to get connected. And then I've heard of non-dominant hand to write back the answer. So you ask God, for example, what does my compliant child need to hear? How do I best love my compliant child? And then the answer comes more natural, from God when it's your non-dominant hand. Personally, my handwriting's so appalling anyway, I do it with my right hand, so it's completely illegible because I write down whatever comes into my mind. It's literally illegible. But another way I came across doing it, which I thought was quite interesting, is that you do circle writing. So I don't know if you've done this, but if it's a question, you start on the outside of the circle and you write and you keep turning the page, and then the circle goes into a spiral of the answer. And in the middle, usually I find like the nugget. So it's like the most recent one I did was like trust in me. And if it's like a central core that, let's say you want to, let's say you want to do it the other way around. So it's like the thing you want to, let's say, grow is courage. You can start off with courage, and then you go from the inside of the circle to the outer one, and that can come to the kind of more external answer of how you get to it. I was given that technique, so that's not necessarily compliance related, but it's a really lovely technique that I thought I'd share. Yeah. Any other questions or shares are welcome. Otherwise, it may be coming time to the end of the meeting anyway. That's tricky. I mean, I don't have the answer. What I found is as an addict, my pattern's been that I don't take action to meet my needs until I'm in exquisite pain. But in getting better to listen and listening to my feelings, which are the whispers from God, emotions are important messages received by my higher power. I get to a place more quickly about whether I need to take further action. I had a really good quote, if I can remember, that was amazing. That was like, essentially, if I'm complaining, it's much better than this, but the essence was, if I find that I'm complaining for more than a couple of days in a row about the same thing, or it was like, then a boundary needs to be put in place. So something needs to happen. An affirmation I can think of that's a little bit in line with that is that I seek to enjoy rather than endure. My pattern with compliance has always been to endure, as if I'm going to get some kind of gold medal at the end. I don't know what I mean. But if I'm complaining too long about something, or if I'm finding that it's a bit like a struggle and a marathon, it's different with every situation and every human being. But I genuinely believe that when I'm in line with God, my life flows. It doesn't mean it's without struggle. My sponsor will always say, you will always be bombarded with coconuts on your journey. But it's about how much the struggle I'm choosing to just sit in like a crappy nappy. And what's promoting me not getting out of the situation, and the things that are, if I have to look at, am I not leaving, or am I staying because of fear, self-seeking, selfish, and dishonesty? And if it's any of those things, then usually I find that it's like, poo. Okay, it's because I'm too scared to leave. I'm being dishonest with myself because I'm minimizing my emotions. I'm actually really hating this job, but I'm not really addressing that. I'm minimizing it. Is it for self-seeking, selfish, dishonest, or fearful reasons that I'm either staying or not going or not doing something? Those are things I'd ask actually about it, and then just sit on it, because often the best thing to do if I'm not sure is doing nothing until I get more clear guidance. And the guidance can come from a number of places, but sometimes I'm still so stuck because it's an internal conflict of introjected beliefs versus spiritual wisdom, that I've actually got on my knees and asked for I've actually said to God, please, I really need a neon sign. Like I need like a, kind of biblical neon sign of guidance. That's how confused and lost I am. And actually often it often comes. And then sometimes I just need the courage to make the step, and then the outcome tends to give me the answer. Quite often it's like I know when I've done the right decision, because everything following that is just confirms that it was God's guidance. I needed to make that. Or it just goes completely tits up, and then I'm like, okay, maybe that wasn't the right way to go. But whatever happens, there's no right or wrong, because I will always be guided back to kind of the pathway of light eventually, as long as I'm willing, as long as I'm listening. So to hold almost the decision lightly as well, and not think, because part of my control is that it's like I'm going to change the path of my life. Not really. God's got it. And to just surrender it to God and hand it over, I think would probably, yeah, if I can do that, it just prevents a lot of a lot of pain for myself, a lot of suffering. Yeah, don't know if that answered it. Good luck. Oh, I'm so glad. One of the quotes from the meditation book of the Code of Meditation, so inspiring. A woman lost her job, which isn't what's happened to you, but I kind of sometimes use this in different manners. And she lost her job, and she got on her knees every day and she gave thanks to God for the job that she knew that was coming, that would be much more aligned with her purpose. And I just thought that's the ultimate act of faith, to start giving thanks for something that you just know is coming. And even if you don't know it's coming, I'd want to grow into that belief. So that's something that could be done as well. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I deeply resonate, and one of the things that, at least I can't take it as my own. Nothing's my own actually. It's all handed from others or from God, or nothing's my own. Said that when like asked for an opinion, that's not quite what you said actually, but it's like when asked for opinion, if there's no kind of real, oh, I don't mind. If there's like a either tendency to go with the majority, or I don't mind, or you decide, or just as an act of like self-esteem building. Because it comes as one of the patterns actually of low self-esteem, like the inability, the difficulty making decisions or something. But just it doesn't even matter if you are not sure if that's how you truly feel, but just make a stand and practice making a stand. So when asked to give your opinion on, yeah, what reading, just pick any, even if even if you're not sure you want it, just to kind of, because actually it's feedback is to get to know myself. Because I, sometimes I'll be like, I'll say it and I'll think afterwards, oh, actually, I didn't really enjoy that. I didn't really want to go to the cinema. I didn't want to see that film. But it's great feedback because I'm getting to learn to know myself, and that builds up the self-esteem. And actually, do you know another thing? Another little tool that I think is really beautiful to do with self-esteem and compliance. And I have a miracles list, and it starts off as a miracles list of financial miracles, because I'm part of another program, and finance was really pounds and pence, so dollars and cents were really tangible. So it's like, I got a voucher for £20 for a bookstore, whatever. So it was very, very tangible. So I could make the miracles list. But my miracles list has extended to miracles in prosperity, which isn't always money actually, prosperity, serenity, so time, and love. And love can be like, when I'm complying, it's not loving myself, it's self-abandoning. So it's love to self and others. And it's got to like, I started just over a year ago, it's got to like 346. And it's such an incredible thing to do. And I remembered one thing I need to put on that miracles list. And as a famous, I don't know if you this is against boundaries in this meeting, but as a famous scientist said, there are only two ways to look at life. One is though nothing is a miracle, one is though everything's a miracle. And something to do with compliance I need to put on my miracles list. I was in the car with my ex-husband a little while ago, and he was vaping, and I didn't feel comfortable with the air. I didn't like the smell. Not my place to judge, but I didn't like it. And I honestly, I don't know how long it took me, but I knew what I felt. I didn't like it. I knew what I wanted. I knew what I needed, but I couldn't immediately roll down a window. And in my mind, it was that whole, what is he going to think? Is it going to offend him? Does it look like I'm judging him? I did the whole of his thinking of me for him. I did the whole, crazy codependency stuff in my head. But again, thanks to this program and awareness, I was like, Srovi, just roll down the window. And I rolled down the window, and no words were exchanged for the whole journey. It was that uncomfortable. But I rolled down the window, and for me, that is a miracle, and it's going to go down on my miracles list. So I think actually that's probably a really good place to end. It's is that time? 10:30 my end anyway.
Could you just repeat the 4 parts though, please?
I've got which 4 parts was there?
Did you say there were 4
Oh,
parts of the miracle list?
the miracle. So yeah, it was prosperity. It's 3 parts. Prosperity, which is kind of, yeah, money, but other stuff. Serenity, which is for me is time. So for example, if I feel overscheduled and then I'm praying to God, being like, I feel really overwhelmed, and then suddenly someone cancels something that I didn't have the courage to do, or yeah, something happens which creates time in my life, or gifted the miracle of love, either love to self, so not acting my patterns and triumph on that part, or loving others. If yeah, it can even be, like I was given thanks for giving service, or that can be love, that a miracle of love. But the more I find the miracles, no matter how small, the more it welcomes more miracles, gives me a real sense of gratitude, which turns scraps into a feast.
All right. Well, we have reached the end of our meeting, and what a great meeting it's been. Thank you so much, Sarobi. Appreciate you. Why don't we all say the closing prayer together, and we'll continue on with whatever we've got to do today. We thank our higher power for all that we have received
in this
As we
meeting.
close, may we take with us
The
wisdom, love,
acceptance,
acceptance,
hope,
and hope of recovery.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
so much.
Thank you, Saravi.
Oh,
Thanks,
you. It was
Ravi.
wonderful. Appreciate
It was
you.
wonderful.
Thank you, everyone, for a great meeting.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, John.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you for
you.
stepping up.
Thanks everyone who did service.
Is this meeting on every week?
Yes.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Michael, for your service.
Thank you for
Yes.
being here. Yes, sir.
It was
Workshops every week, same time, same place.
Thank you. This is wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here.
Have a great day, Michael.
You, John. Take care.
Always good to see you.
Great to see you, my friend.